Hello, everyone, and welcome back to In Search of Success, the podcast where we discuss, dissect, and deconstruct various aspects of life, success, and leadership so that we can share with you the tools and the techniques, the strategies and the tactics, and the formulas and the frameworks you need to bring your ideas to life, to turn your dreams into reality, and to achieve anything you set your mind to. This week's guest is a very special person, which I think I keep telling in each episode because all my guests are special people. So this week's guest is Kanishka Sinha. Kanishka is the managing partner of Stillwater Consulting, which is a training firm and an executive coaching firm. And Kanishka is a speaker and author. He has spoken on multiple TEDx events, and his book is The Game of Life, which is a book based in psychology and philosophy. And he is a former professor of ISB Hyderabad. And Kanishka, as an employee, I think worked for Arthur Andersen and HUL, etc. And he has 20 years of experience in coaching and mentoring people in Fortune 500 companies across the planet. And he is a chartered accountant. He has done his engineering from Imperial College London, and he has an MBA from ISB Hyderabad again. And the discussion was pretty intellectual. It was education for me as well, and Kanishka has a very unique viewpoint on various aspects of leadership, right? And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thoroughly learned a lot from him. I hope you will find this episode valuable as well. So go ahead, enjoy the discussion, and I'll see you at the end of the episode. Hi Kanishka, good morning. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, yeah.
Excited to have a discussion?
I am, yes. I had a foot injury a little while ago, and I was worried that it wasn't healing better, but now finally it seems to be getting better. So I'm feeling very optimistic just now. So a good way to start the day.
Okay, let's start with a very fundamental question. When somebody says leader, who comes to your mind? Is there a particular person that comes to your mind? How does leader is mapped into your brain? What's the mapping we have?
Yeah, I mean, for me, actually, I was looking for a couple of statues over here that I have. I have one which is Yoda over here, my Star Wars guru.
Right.
And the other one, let me just see if I can find it. I always had a statue of Gandhi over here. I don't know if you can see that clearly, but those are the two that I have on my desk anyway. And I think, yeah, those are the two first names that come to my mind. I think Gandhi because what he did was extraordinary, I feel. And if I try and put myself in his shoes, like saying one day that, no, India is going to be free, we need to get freedom. And at that time, like when he lived, now it seems obviously every country is going to get freedom in retrospect. But at that time, the English would have been ruling India for like 300 years or something like that. They're like the most powerful empire in the world. And for one person to say, you know what, I'm going to start walking towards the beach and we're going to make some salt. And like thousands and thousands of people are going to follow me. And, this is going to inspire the country to say we're going to like break the shackles, etc. To have that much conviction in what he's doing and right, and to take the most powerful force in the known world, in the whole of history until that time, one person to even imagine that was possible. I mean, the analogy today would be for me to say, hey, you know what? There's a lot of corruption in India. I need to do something to stop it. I'm going to go on a march. I'm going to put a post on LinkedIn. Hey, we need to end the corruption, and people are going to follow me. It seems ridiculous. I'd go walking. Who's going to follow me? Who's going to area corruption to hoga? What are you going to change in corruption? But for somebody to believe that they can effectively defeat the most powerful force in the world, that is the sort of, in today's thing, just like we're going to end corruption. We're going to end, war, for example, like we're going to end the religious divide between people. I am going to do that. So that for me was amazing. And, reading his book, The Story of My Experiments with the Truth, his determination and willpower and just sheer pig-headedness, as it were, just reading how determined he was is something that has been really inspiring. And I think, it's something I don't think I would make those kind of sacrifices. I don't have that level of conviction. But when I see somebody else doing it, I'm like, okay, I know that's now possible. Even though I don't know if I would do that, I don't think I would make those kind of sacrifices. But to say, we're going to go and we're going to do it not through violence, we're going to do it through peace. Who has done that before? For 4,000, 5,000 years, if you've got somebody who's kind of dominating you, the way to handle it is by fighting back, by getting the bombs, the guns. That's always been through history. For somebody to say, no, we're going to win through force of through the power of truth, satyagraha. We are going to use principles, and yes, they may hit us with sticks, they may lock us, but eventually their humanity will be triggered and they will give us freedom because they realize what they're doing is wrong. I mean, it's an incredible belief in the conviction of the power of truth. And maybe it won't work everywhere. Like maybe if they'd done it with Nazi Germany, they would have said, okay, shoot him and put him in the gas chamber. So I'm not saying it would have worked every place, but in that place at that time, it just created this swell, this momentum. And I think that's just, it's unbelievable what I think he did. And it's a real lesson for me about what is possible.
So, what stands out of us, Gandhi as a leader, right? What stands out? Is it the conviction, as they say, leadership is about influence, right? Somebody has a quote, John Maxwell, I think, okay, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less, right? So,
yeah.
Influence, the way I see it from your story, Gandhi's story, is how transfer of your conviction. Yeah. You are convinced that I can achieve this and this is going to happen. Now, how do you transfer that to the followers, right? So that they also believe and they are also convinced that this is going to happen and we have to do it this way. That's what leadership is. But do you think there is anything else that comes to you from Gandhi's story, that yes, these are the personality traits or these are the skills? That's what made leaders so powerful in those days, without any internet, without any reach. You just walk and people are following you. And then the other aspect from the same story that comes out is when you have a vision, that vision is not about you. That vision is about the people of the country, right? And when you have a vision around your team members, around your followers, around a particular goal that aligns everyone, it becomes easier to basically, get that alignment or that influence. So those are the two I see. What else do you see from Mahatma Gandhi that leaders today can learn?
I think it's you've got to go past your own boundaries, because we all have, I think, our own fears and barriers. And when we see somebody else overcome those barriers, we think, okay, if they can do it, maybe it's possible for me to do it. If he's willing to kind of go to jail, if he's willing to get hit, with a stick or whatever, maybe I can do those things. So in whatever field it is, the people who are right at the top have overcome certain barriers. And it doesn't have to be, like the sticks in British, etc. It could be, you could be a thought leader, like Richard Feynman, for example, Nobel Prize winning physicist. He needs to get over the boredom of his classes. He needs to kind of like attack a subject, question his assumptions, go deeper, more rigorously into the thinking, not give up when he's not understanding, etc. And so through that, he becomes, a Nobel Prize winner. And so other people who are like inspired by that, like, hey, you know what? If this problem is tough, see it as a puzzle to be solved. Don't see this as the final thing saying, oh, I'm not smart enough. It's a puzzle. So that sparks my curiosity. So an intellectual leader forces me to get over, oh, this is too difficult for me, right? If I see a Roger Federer playing, I know he's got through injury. He's pushed himself when he was exhausted. Okay, so somebody who's following in those footsteps will learn something else. A mother, for example, and when she gets up at 2 in the morning and goes to feed the baby because that's what needs to be done. Well, the daughter who sees her doing that will say, hey, that's what's required. So when we see other people break through their barriers, whether that's intellectual or as a mother or as a sports person, we feel like it's possible for me also to do this thing. And so we look for people who will help dispel our own fears, who will, and that's why we follow them. We think that by being in their presence or going in that direction, we will also learn what we need to kind of like break these things that we can feel up holding ourselves back. So, an Indian and say the British rule, this kind of sense of cowering for a British person. If I say this, I might get hit. If I say this, they might lock me up, etc. I'm scared. I'm walking around that fear. I see somebody else who doesn't seem to have that fear, and I say, wow, I'd love to live without that fear, and I can see it's possible. And by doing a little bit more of what person is doing, that will have me move forward in my journey. So I think the one line answer to your question is, I think doing what is hard for us and getting on the other side inspires other people who want to do similar things in their lives as well.
Right. So basically lead by example. Huh?
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Makes a lot of sense in this particular context. Now, when you look at stories like Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr., these are people without any authority. Nobody has given them a position or power that, go and do this thing, right? So, but nowadays, when you look at the corporate sector, mostly, not everyone, but mostly you see leadership is about the designation, right? And understanding the nuances of people, emotional intelligence, and all those other aspects, it's missing in a lot of cases. So, and when you look at corporates, every company nowadays have a leadership development program, right? Now you look at this bunch, which is kind of the most powerful leaders, most influential leaders, most impactful, and results they have created is very impactful. You look at these leaders, they didn't go through any leadership development program. Then you ask a question like, yeah, we have leadership development programs and we are not producing leaders that people want to follow to a particular vision. And we have our internal conflicts and, people are leaving because they are not happy with the managers, right? And here there are people who didn't go through any course. So how do you develop these leaders?
That now it's more about designation and less about inspiration. I actually feel it's the other way around. I feel like earlier we used to think that our leaders are better because nobody would question them. If somebody has a certain amount of age, you listen to your grandparents, you listen to your parents, the family owner of a business, like say they say something and you do it. And so because we're not questioning our leaders, they appear, flawless in some way, right? But today, what's happened is because of social media, everybody has got a point of view. So it's not just Doordarshan that has a point of view and say, okay, that's what they're saying. 1,000 people are on social media, millions of people, and everybody has their own point of view. So to kind of like have one communication for Doordarshan, let's say, you can say something and say it one, but can you please each one of the million social media users? Each one has a different preference, each one has a different kind of value, each one has a different priority. So now everybody has a voice. It's much more easier to be criticized. So when Nehru was leader, for example, how many people would you really have criticizing him? But today, whether it's Rahul Gandhi or Kejriwal or Modi, they're not going to be, you're going to hear voices against each one of them, for and against them. And so it looks like they're flawed because there's just so much more room to criticize and question. And so the job of the leaders has become much more harder because they can't do it through designation. Similarly, for organizations, earlier people would stay with a company for like 25 years. They would join as like 20-year-old, they would retire at 65. So, for 45 years, you're working in one company. If the head of that company says something, you're like, this is my entire career, my life, I have to keep him happy. I'll do what he says. Today, that's not the case. You have like people who are like, 40 years old who've literally been through 8 different companies. So if you don't like what your leader is saying, if you don't get the promotion you want, if you're not getting along with your boss, fine, I'll move to another one in the next 6 months. And then, so the job of the leader is now, I can't do it through designation because people have so many opportunities. I need to create culture where people buy in. And because everybody's got different preferences and more criticism, etc., it feels like our leaders are more flawed because we have the space to criticize them and we have options to choose if we don't like them. But it's actually that their operating environment has become much more complex. And there's no person today who is above criticism. Anybody. There's whether it's a Malala or a Nobel Prize
Nobody.
winner, Obama, or whoever it is, everybody will be universally criticized, and not universally by many many millions of people. So I think that the requirements of leadership have become more. The amount of skill of kind of like meeting the expectations of a whole bunch of people has become more. And so now we do need to invest in leadership development because no more are people are just going to listen to you and hear you and say, okay, they've been in the company for 15 years, I've been here for 2 years, so let me do it. You'll have like a young IIT graduate who's on a crore salary, and he's like, what do you know about AI? I've got this patent, etc. I'll tell you what we need to do about the future. Today, 3 months ago, AI was not there in such a big way. So a manager who's kind of done his education in a certain level, he doesn't know necessarily as much about AI and its possibilities as a new fresher, which was different. In HUL when I was there, my boss had done my role as a sales manager. His boss had done my role as a sales manager 10 years ago. His boss had done my role 15 years ago. So everybody had done exactly what I had done plus 15 years. So when they say, hey, Kanish, you're doing this, it comes from what I have done plus 20 years of experience. But today, as a leader doesn't have 20 years of experience in AI, this fresh graduate has more experience. So the skills I need to kind of not have them feel cynical, to feel that I'm not clueless, to still kind of guide them while they feel like they know more than me. I think it's a harder situation. And so we need conscious training in a way that perhaps, the elderly grandfather of a family didn't need to say communicate in this way to get your grandkids buy-in. You don't now you do need to say, okay, your kids, if you want them to marry a certain person, you can't just say, in our culture, we don't do that. They will just run away and kind of like you'll never speak to them again. You've got to learn how to deal with that new emerging kind of flatness of society and the openness of communication that's there now.
Right. That's nicely, you have taken us through the evolution of leadership over the last few decades. Thank you for that. And you mentioned the role of a leader has kind of evolved into kind of core, the way I look at it, it's kind of the core of a leader's, corporate leader's job at least, is to create a culture where, I don't want to get into the details, but from you, I want to know what would be those components of a culture where people would love to work. And you as a corporate leader would be able to hire the best talent or attract the best talent and retain it. So if you're coaching me or mentoring me, what would be your advice on creating a culture inside my organization? Let's say I'm a startup with only 2 to 3 years or 5 years of total existence, but we have been hustling for the last 5 years. Now we want to streamline stuff. Now that we have funding, we have a customer base and we want to increase it. We want to streamline, standardize processes and hire leadership who can take us to the next level. So how would you advise me to create culture inside this company? What would be your advice?
I think it's different for different people. I mean, rather than saying this is what you should do, I would ask them, what kind of culture do you want? You know, and then how would you go about it? So I wouldn't tell them, because you see that every company has a different culture, and some cultures are very radically different to other cultures. So, for example, Elon Musk has been in the news. He's the richest person in the world. So it's not like he's been unsuccessful in rolling out what he's been doing is build companies that are very valuable and stuff like that. But he basically says, don't talk to me about work-life balance. That's what Jeff Bezos says. That's even what Narayan Murthy said. Don't talk to me about that. I want you guys working hard. I work hard. I think that's an important value. And if you want to be here, you got to work hard. So it will attract the sort of people who say, I want to work hard. And as a result of that, I want to produce some products that I really feel are going to change the world. That, I'm going to produce the iPod. I'm going to produce, a rocket that goes to Mars. I'm going to produce a car that's going to change, the environment footprint of the planet. There are people who are like, I'm willing to put those 14 hours days because that is my personality. And I want to work in a culture where not everybody's leaving at 5 o'clock. And I'm like, where's that report? They just went home, etc. I will feel frustrated. Now, in another place, it'll be a very different culture. It's like, hey, you know what? Once you're done 5, 6 p.m., go home, spend time with your family, etc. So if you are a hard driving, come on, let's work, let's get this done, and you have a whole bunch of people who don't match your culture, it will completely fail. And at the same time, if you're a person who says, 6 o'clock, it's 10 to 6, that's what our time is, and you have somebody who's young and is really kind of passionate and he wants to kind of change the world and he wants to really do something and, not go home and, relax. He wants to kind of push his boundaries and see, well, that person is going to feel frustrated in your culture. So rather than saying, this is what a good culture is and this is what you should do, tell me what is the kind of company you want to build. Tell me the kind of people you want to work with. Tell me now, how would you go about institutionalizing that? How would you go about finding those people, attracting them, communicating what your culture is like, so the people who fit it will come towards it. It's like marriage, it's not like what kind of person should you marry. It's like, what kind of person do you want to marry? Do you want to go on long walks? Do you like movies? Do you like music? Do you like traveling the world? Do you like, dosa? Do you like veg food? Do you want to have kids? Don't have kids? So I'm not going to tell you this is the kind of life you should live. This is the kind of person you should marry. This is the kind of kids you should have. It's like, no, what do you want? And let's talk about how we can create a culture that fits what your vision is. And people will self-select and find their way. And, there'll be some people who don't quite fit. You're going to lose some of them. Okay, that's part of having a strong culture. is that some people won't fit. If you have something that everybody fits in, it's not actually it's not possible, and it's very diluted. So Goldman Sachs, it's like self-sufficiency. You got to do the work. It's a meritocracy. That's what it is. It's not about tenure. And then some people are going to feel demotivated because they've been working for the company 10 years, and somebody 2 years in has now been promoted and their boss. That's going to be very demoralizing. In a government system, it's a different culture. And
Right.
over there, if you take like a 2-year old and you put them above somebody who's like 15 years old, the culture will snap. It won't be able to handle it. People will quit. There will be strikes. It'll fall. So find the culture that you believe in, and then it's okay if not everybody fits in that. You want to make it as inclusive as possible to get people who can add value. But at some people, if you have a strong culture, some people will not like it, and that's okay.
Absolutely. There is no one size fit all. So that's fine. But let's say I ask you a different question in terms of culture creation. Say that as an entrepreneur, I understand the power of innovation and how to survive and to become a market leader. I have to continuously keep innovating. Any company, doesn't matter. But if you're especially in the tech space, you have to be continuously innovating, right? So you take Apple, you take Google, you take Amazon, right? One after the other, right? So if my question comes to you, okay, hey, Kanishka, can you give me some advice on how do I create a culture of innovation inside my company, right? What would be your advice? I know that Google has a culture of 20% time where the employees can focus on their pet project, right? And I know that FedEx Day is celebrated in Atlassian, when you have to deliver a product or a service over a 24-hour period, right? So I know these things, but how do I build my culture of innovation? What would be your take on that? Or how would you advise me?
I think it's hire people who are smarter than me, who are more innovative than me. If I mean, the danger is, A quality people will hire B quality people who they're not threatened by, and B quality people will hire C quality
Equality,
people.
right?
So there's a dilution as the company expands. But
Right.
if like I think it was Mark Zuckerberg who says, I only hire people who I would be comfortable reporting to myself. You
Right.
know, and somebody else, I hire people who are smarter than me. So if I can hire people who have skills that I don't, and I'm actually feeling insecure because they know more about me, well, that's when I'm going to get more value. That's when, something is going to emerge. But if I'm hiring somebody who knows like 75%, and I'll train them, I'll groom them, well, they're maximum going to kind of like be to my level.
Right.
If I'm teaching them, the most a teacher can give is what knowledge I have. So the student can only become as good as a teacher. But if I say no, A quality is going to hire A plus quality,
Right.
A plus is going to hire A plus plus, we're going to get a system which I'm not trying to control because I feel like I know more than these people. I can tell them what to do. I'm like, I don't know what they're going to tell me. They have better ideas than me, and I have to figure out how I can get that. That's what's really going to explode. So, in the short line is, if you want a culture of innovation, hire people who kind of scare you a little bit. Not like immature people, but people who are like making you a little bit uncomfortable, saying, "Wow, they know a lot," and I'm trying to figure it out. That's where it'll come from.
Okay, great. So now when we are talking about creating the culture, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Pretty well known line. Do you agree with that, or you have a different view? How is that?
Um, Yeah, I mean, at one level, if the strategy is not right, if the culture is of, being honest with ourselves and fixing it, then you'll fix the strategy. So, and if the culture is we're not gonna, question ourselves, we're not gonna like change our things, we're gonna like be rigid about it, then the strategy will not work. So, in that way, culture can correct the strategy. The strategy is very unlikely to correct the culture because the culture tells us what we're gonna do, right? But having said that, I think the question is not helpful because it implies it's either this or that.
Or
And
that,
so, what
right?
meaningful decision am I going to do? If I say, am I going to go for holiday to Goa or am I going to go to Thailand? Then there is a choice to be made. But should we focus on strategy or should we focus on culture? Implies like there's a choice, but it's not. It's like, does this shape, should we have a round shape or should we have a yellow shape? There's no reason why I can't have a round ball. So why am I saying should we have a round shape or a yellow shape? So it's both, and both are important, and there's no choice to be made. So the question becomes an abstraction, and it doesn't actually help us in making a specific decision about what to do next. I think so.
Got it. A lot of recently, in the recent few years, a lot of focus has been that one of the key skills that a leader should have in order to be effective at their work, or in order to be impactful or inspiring at their workplace, is to become emotionally intelligent, right? So what's your take on emotional intelligence, and really, is it a differentiator in terms of an effective leader or successful leader versus a not so successful leader? How do you see emotional intelligence in the context of leadership?
Yeah, I think one of the surprising things I've found about working with successful people is that they're not all emotionally intelligent. And I think to an extent, it's a myth that it's the most emotionally intelligent people that are the most successful. I mean, again, Elon Musk, who's the richest person in the world today, he will send out random tweets, he will sack people, he will say things, he will smoke cannabis, live on a thing, the shares tank when people see him doing that. I think he was on the Joe Rogan show or something
Joe
that he
Rogan show,
spoke
yes.
so, I mean, according to our conventional kind of ideas of what is emotional intelligence, which is, speaking after kind of a pause, for example, speaking in a way that doesn't offend people, making decisions by getting in buy-in, etc. There are a lot of, qualities that he displays that are not necessarily in our traditional knowledge model of what would be an emotionally intelligent person. And yet he is very successful. Yet he has built very successful companies. Yet he has delivered on outcomes that people would really struggle to deliver. You have people like Elon, Bill Gates when he was starting off. He was, quoted as telling his team, you guys are useless. I could design this in one day. I could work overnight and program all this stuff. So to say to your team, I could do this much better than you guys. You guys are useless. Again, you would say that's not an emotionally intelligent behavior in the way that we think of it.
Right.
You'd like listen to them, understand their problems, guide them. He's like, hey, this is crap. I expect more of you. And he walks out of the room in a huff. But again, he became the richest person on the planet. Steve Jobs. They said that he has a reality distortion field. When he says this is possible, he won't listen to any arguments against it. He'll just like say, no, this is what's possible. And people will find it very frustrating dealing with him. And yet he was like, no, this is how we're going to make the iPhone. This is the glass we're going to do. We're going to get the Gorilla Glass in this time frame. And I don't care if you're saying it's impossible. It has to be done. He would deny his paternity for his daughter, I think, even though the DNA evidence said that she is his daughter. Again, behaviors that you would not associate with emotional intelligence. So I think it's something that we like to believe that a calm, patient, listening, buy-in person will kind of be successful. Have people like Donald Trump being elected as by hundreds of millions of people, by trusted and inspiring hundreds of millions of people. But again, from the outside, when we're not part of his vote bank, you would not say that some of his behavior, threatening nuclear war with, North Korea, etc., is emotionally intelligent. So I think that in a large organization, for you to move through the ranks and get promoted by meeting your boss's expectations and kind of meeting your stakeholders and clients expectations, that you need a little bit more what we would traditionally call as maturity, emotional intelligence. But when you are at the cutting edge, then sometimes what drives a person to excellence, the passion, the almost the lack of compromise, the uncompromising nature in a way, what makes them successful is also what makes them emotionally unintelligent in some other places. Like Elon Musk, I think, has had 3 divorces. Bill Gates has got a divorce. Jeff Bezos has got a divorce. A lot of the very, very successful people are not, finding it as easy in their relationships as well. So you think, okay, well, they've been so successful, they must be really emotionally intelligent. But it's not. Maybe it's just because they're busy. It's hard to like manage a marriage with all the amount of work as well. But you'd say that it's not always true that emotionally intelligence is required for success, and all successful people are what we would call as emotional intelligence. And maybe we even need to change our definition of emotional intelligence, because maybe walking out of a huff in that meeting and say, this is useless. You guys have given me just complete shit. Maybe that is emotionally intelligent because it kind of pushes people. It stings them into action. It's like, we need to work hard. We need to like be more rigorous in our thinking. and other person who would have listened and calmly waited and patiently explained is actually creating a culture where people are not being as rigorous with their thinking because it's more gentle, etc. And of course, you can go too far. You can have mass quittings because people are not willing to buy it, etc. So I think it can be very easy to kind of like superimpose our ideas of what a good person should be based on the myths and legends we read and say that's what it is. But the data doesn't indicate that all leaders fit that calm, gentle, rational model.
Right. No, you're true. When you talk about Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Cuban, Steve Jobs, I've seen, everybody has observed this, that they have this, I wouldn't say arrogant, probably the better word is unapologetic. They are unapologetic in their approach to things, right? So that is a pattern you see in almost all successful entrepreneurs, business owners, and leaders as well. So yes, probably, but at the same time, you also listen to, let's say Simon Sinek giving an example of, I think, Nelson Mandela, who kind of mentioned his dad's story that there is a tribe somewhere in South Africa where the leader is the last one to speak, right? So that means the context behind that is, before the leader sets the context, okay, boss, this is the problem, this is what I'm thinking, you have to listen to everybody's point of view. Okay, this is the problem we are kind of trying to solve, and what's your thoughts, right? So that is something that people associate with emotional intelligence, right? Try to listen to everybody's ideas before you just decide what is the iPhone you're going to make, right? So how do you find a balance between the two? Is there a need to have balance between these two, or there's a different styles of leadership? What would be your opinion on that?
I think there are different styles of leadership. And one person might say the leader speaks last and listens to everybody. But Steve Jobs, one of his famous quotes is, "Don't listen to your customer. The customer doesn't have a clue." So if I say to people, I'll give you an iPod and a music device that you can have, the customer doesn't even know what's possible, doesn't know what they want. So I'm gonna like say, this is what's possible. I will then go and to convince the customer. So yes, there's some people who, of course, will, coming from HUL, myself, Unilever, we would do a lot of customer research before we launch a soap. We'll ask people, what do you think about this idea? What do you think about this poster? Which of these slogans appeals to you? We'll ask them, and then after doing all the research, then we'll produce the ad or the soap or the formulation, etc. But there are other people, very, very successful people, who hold that if you listen to customers, they will tell you based on their experience, what they have just now. They can't envision the future as well as you might be able to. And I found that in my workshops sometimes, that the client will say, like, I want a problem solving skill. My guys are I designed a program which requires people to do a virtual program where they're online for 3.5 hours, do an hour pre-work, etc. And people said, no, people won't do an hour of pre-work before they'll come in. They'll find it boring. They won't sit for 3.5 hours in an online workshop. And I hear that, but then if I disband my design based on understandable concerns, then I really believe in this. I really believe that if we do this, it's going to be powerful. And when we did it, yes, of course, some of the concerns were valid, but we really found that it worked very well as well. So sometimes you can say, I know where they're coming from, the customers. I hear them, and I really believe this. I'm going to go with my gut. Some people say the customer doesn't know what they want. They can't envision the future. I can do it, and I can tell them, hey, this would be a great idea. Especially in, like you're speaking about technology. If somebody says, oh, you'll be able to get a software that will be able to answer your questions. We're like, yeah, but I have Google. But this will answer your questions to the word. You'll ask in natural language, like, what movies are playing in Mumbai at 6 o'clock, and it'll give you an answer that these movies are playing at 6 o'clock. And you'd say, I don't need that. I just say movies 6 o'clock Mumbai in Google, and it gives me the answer. I flick through a few films. So maybe I can't even, visualize what it's going to look like. So asking the customer, especially in high tech, may not actually be the best source. So yeah, in some places like a tribe where you've been in a certain culture for many years, etc., and there's a certain amount of stability, hear people's ideas. And in some places you don't. So I think it really depends on, you try it. If you're kind of failing too much, you need to listen too much. If you're listening too much and failing, then maybe you need to trust yourself more. So it's a process of experimentation. Some people will veer to one side in certain cultures, certain personalities. Some will veer to another. But there's a range. Beyond one side, there's a cliff. beyond the other side, there's a cliff. You can listen too much to people and lose your own kind of ideas and kind of your authenticity. And you could not listen enough, and then you become rigid and inflexible. So there are cliffs on both sides. And there is a range between some people who pick this side, some people, there's an effective range where you can operate in.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. You mentioned authenticity, and kind of in this podcast, multiple times when I ask people, what is the core personality trait of a leader? And the answer has been kind of unequivocal authenticity. If you're not authentic as a leader, having followers that follow you, believe in a vision, and then work towards making that vision a reality is going to be really challenging. So, what is, in your opinion, role of authenticity in becoming an effective or successful leader?
Yeah, I have a slightly different definition of authenticity that I kind of like introduce the participants to, and it's doing what's effective, doing what's required to produce the outcomes you want. Authenticity, not just saying what's on your mind, saying what you feel. If like a terrorist captures, is asking me where your kid hiding, and I lie to him saying, oh, I don't know where they are when I know they're over here. I'm lying, but I'm being authentic, right? Because I'm making a decision based on what I want to happen in life, which is I don't want my kids to be shot by this guy, right? So I'm lying, but I'm being authentic. Similarly, if I'm having, an argument with my wife, I don't say the words on my lips just now. I go for a walk, I calm down, and when I'm kind of connected back with why she's so important to me, then I come and have that conversation. Me saying what I'm thinking and feeling right now, even though it might hurt her, is not me being authentic. That's me being indisciplined and lazy. This is verbal diarrhea. And some people think that doing what you're thinking and saying, you feel that that's being authentic. Some people will say, I'm a creative person. When my boss asks me to do all this admin work, this is not my style. This is not my thing. This is not me being authentic. I'm selling myself. Okay, but if you don't do that boring admin work, you don't create the reliability in their eyes, the credibility in their eyes, the dependability, such that they would be willing to give you a bigger,
responsibility.
Platform on which you can express that creativity. So you're sabotaging yourself by saying, I'm a creative person, so me doing this work is me not being authentic, right? So do what's required to get the outcome that you want, right? Rather than this is my behavior. So authenticity in an organization might be not talking about we're going to have mass layoffs later in the year. Is that authentic? Because if we say we're going to have that, the uncertainty might drop the performance. The share price might collapse. You might have mass layoff. People quitting quickly, and we can't understand who's gone, and key systems are breaking down, etc. And like Twitter, for example, is an example of where he said we're going to have layoffs, and a lot of people quit, and there is turbulence there. But you could have that if you say there will be layoffs. So rather than that, saying we are evaluating, we'll have discussions, we'll let you know as soon as we know, etc. And then at a gradual level, kind of seeping that conversation through the layers. First, we tell this level of layers, then they will tell the next level, then they will so there's a cascading of information. Now, is that authentic? By the old definition of saying what you know and putting out what's true, it's inauthentic behavior. But I'm going to say if it's ineffective and your company goes bankrupt, then you didn't make decisions based on what's important to you, which is, preserving the jobs for the other people in the company that you can, providing the service to your customers. So I think authenticity can be sometimes a self-sabotage argument, right? When we are doing things in the name of being authentic that are getting in the way of us achieving the things that are really important to us, then it's actually a lack of emotional intelligence is what I would say. And when you're doing the things that actually have you move forward to your destination, doing things that are easy for me, doing things that are hard for me that I need to be disciplined on, speaking honestly when that's required, being circumspect and discreet when that's required, all that is what I would call as part of authenticity, which is a slightly different definition.
It makes a lot of sense. In fact, this is kind of knowledge for me as well. I'm learning this because when I understand authenticity from the point of view of leadership or in the context of leadership, I'm focusing on the person, individual authenticity. Say what you're feeling, right? And if you're scared, also share that, right? So that's what it is. But what you are saying is it's not about personal authenticity. You're talking about outcome-based authenticity. If you're not authentic, you're going to create outcomes that nobody wants, basically, right?
Right.
As a leader, it's your responsibility to be authentic to the outcome, right? So it makes a lot of sense. Now, going back to the question of developing these leaders, so the cliched question, what do you believe? Leaders are born or leaders are made?
I think there's only one answer to that. They're made because it's your choice. If you say like I'm born, then that creates arrogance. Or if I'm not born, then there's creation of helplessness. So you've got to say, no, it's, their choices. Maybe there's some, I don't know, genetic component. Maybe there is in, running a 100-meter race. If you're from a certain part of Africa, that lineage, you have more chances. But as a leader, you can say, if you tell yourself, I believe I can learn what is required for me to be effective in these situations, I think that's an empowering belief. And you say, well, either I have it or I don't. Then if you think I have it, then you'll be close to other points of view. You'll be close to learning because I have it, right? What do I need to do? And if you think I don't have it, then you're trapped. So I don't know what the truth is, but I think as a lens through which I view myself, and the development of others. If I think that this person just doesn't have what it takes, I'm not going to invest in development. I'm going to say, well, they're either going to get sacked or they'll become leaders. There's nothing I need to do. So definitely from where I look at the world, it's got to be there's only one way of looking at it. Yeah.
So now, in the process of creating the next generation of leaders, I want to understand a few factors that I believe play a certain role, maybe a significant role, maybe a little role, but I have a few factors I believe they play a certain role in developing the next generation of leaders. First is parenting. So according to your experience or your understanding, what role does parenting play in developing leaders of the next generation? Or it doesn't play any role?
I don't know. Again, Elon Musk, he said his father was very, brutal to him, bullied him, etc. They don't speak to each other. Obama, I think, had a single mom, for example. Maybe Bill Clinton as well. I'm not sure what his upbringing was. So you hear lots of stories of kids who didn't have necessarily the best
childhood
family. Yeah, the childhood. They didn't have the best childhood, and it pushed them in certain ways. It developed certain things about them. And there are other people you hear, who've had very good childhoods, and they've also done very well. So I don't know what the role is. I think again, as a parent, I'm going to assume that I do have some role, because otherwise I'm like, they'll do what they do. I don't care. Nothing I do affects them. So I believe I have some role in providing them a foundation. So I'm going to act on the basis of that. But I also know that as they become older, their friends and peers start influencing, what they learn and where they go. I think society, what's happening in the world, has a shape on how people see. Why is Gen X different from the millennials? Why is that different from the boomers? There's something about the culture of the world that has an impact, and it's personal experiences that people have on their journey, that really shape them as well. So I think maybe there's a role, but how much there is, I don't know. And I feel that people, even with adverse situations growing up, have become very, very successful. So if I was to kind of summarize, I'd say it has some role, and so I'm going to take my role as a parent seriously. But also, there are many other factors involved. So that allows kids to have the freedom as well. It's not like I have to control every single thing about them to make them a certain way. There's a certain amount I can influence, maybe 10%, and 90% is going to be shaped by their, experiences. I have a different personality from my sister. For example, we're born in the same family, we've had the same education, etc. And we have certain things in common, certain things that are very different. My kids have very different personalities, even though they're born in the same family. So if it was true that parents kind of like generate that, then everybody would be identical to their siblings. But we see that even as kids, even before they've had the childhood experiences, they have different personalities. And then as they have, breakups, or, they start a company that fails, or they move to a country and somebody says something, or they read one book, etc., different things emerge. So I wouldn't put it all on the parenting. And I would also say there's probably some influence as well.
Okay. So after parenting, the second factor I believe plays a little bit of role in developing leadership qualities is sports. So playing a particular sports, do you think that helps kind of enhance the leadership qualities a person has, and teaches them those qualities, people who do not have them? Or what's your take on sports and leadership development?
Again, I think it's there's no one size fits. I really like sports. And both my kids play football like 4 times a week. I leave at 2 o'clock to pick them up from school, take them for football coaching, get them back. So I'm back by 8:30. So 2 to 8:30 is pretty much with my kids going for sports coaching like 4 times a week maybe, right? And I really believe that has helped them learn teamwork, get their fitness, the ability to lose, the ability to win, the practice, teamwork. So I think it teaches a lot of things. But there are also a lot of kids who don't enjoy sports, and I think it would be unfair to say, okay, because they're not enjoying sports or they're not good at sports, that means in some way their leadership potential is diminished. There are some people who love just reading a book or art or music, and those things about mastering what you need to master in yourself to become good at, whether it's archery or batting like a Sachin Tendulkar, etc. Um, each each art form, whether it's sports or writing or whatever it is, um, the target is yourself. I read this beautiful saying which say in Zen, the you are an archer, but the target is yourself. So through becoming good, through mastering any field, in order to master a field, you need to kind of learn to master yourself. And so whether you're being a great journalist, you got to master yourself to become a great journalist. You need to master yourself to become a great footballer. You need to master yourself to become a great artist. And so that external mechanism is a means through which I can get a handle on myself and develop and grow, right? Even artists, drawing paintings, they're saying, I'm going through a process of growth and evolution and I'm learning things. So they also have plenty to offer. Even a coder sitting and learning, Bill Gates, maybe he didn't play football, etc. He just sat with his laptop as a, 7-year-old kid, learn how to code. And that gave him the clarity on what he can provide to his customers, and that clarity of, hey, this is what a lot of companies are looking for, gave him the conviction he needed to set up a company at the age of 18, drop out of college, etc., and build the biggest organization, perhaps one of the biggest organizations at that time. So I feel that sports is a great mechanism of developing certain competencies at a certain age, but I wouldn't say it's the only one. And I would say find something that you find interesting, learn to master it, and in the process of mastering whatever field you've picked, you will learn the competencies that will help you one day inspire other people. And it could be art. So I don't want the quiet introvert artist to feel like, oh, I can't become a leader. Yes, you can. It's just going to be a slightly different path.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, you've said parenting plays a certain role, not everything. Sports, again, certain people, certain aspects, not everything. What's your take on travel? Getting exposed to different approaches of life, different approaches of decision making, different approaches of work-life balance, and different exposed to different cultures, different way of doing work, giving priority to work at a certain way. So exposure through travel. Do you think travel actually makes you a better person, or on a long term a better leader, or you can acquire certain traits of leadership by traveling? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm a person who's actually traveled a lot when I was young. So when I was like by about 10, lived in, I've not lived in, but I've traveled to like 25 different countries, been around the world 2 times, etc. And uh, I've lived in, my parents lived in Kenya, they lived in Malaysia, I've lived in the UK for 12 years, etc. And I've traveled quite a bit. But, and of course, I studied abroad at, Imperial, did my CA there. But I haven't noticed that I am much smarter or have anything really that much different to say from people who have grown up in Chennai throughout their lives. They've done their schooling there, the same school for like 14, 15 years. I like went to 14 different schools. They went to a college close to their parents. They worked over there. And when I meet them, I don't feel like, oh, they don't know anything, because you can read books, you see TV, you can explore, you can have conversations with people, you can be curious, you can go on the internet. So today the entire world is right here at our laptop, it's right
Yeah.
here on the TV. And earlier when I was young, I would say, no, I've got to send my kids abroad because I had that opportunity to study abroad. My business partner Girish says, no, you know what, I want her to do her college in India. And I feel like, yeah, actually, you know what? That's right. Today with Google, I can learn anything about anything, any subject. If I want to learn logistics or technology or artificial intelligence or genomics, I don't need to go to Stanford, right? If I want to kind of meet international people, I will get that as part of, just reading lots of books, watching movies. So I have personally loved traveling, and I feel like I have gained from it. But again, I don't want people who haven't done as much to feel like there's something they lack. Because when I speak to them, I don't experience that missing in them. I think if you're curious, the world comes to you. I when I go abroad, I eat the most fanciest food that I can find. I eat like kangaroo, I'll eat snail, I'll eat giraffe, I'll eat gnu, I'll eat alligator. Girish will prefer having a dosa every day of the week. He would prefer, and he doesn't want to go to Japan and have sushi. He has absolutely no interest. And yet, we're in the same company, we're at the same level, we're doing the same work, we're, both appreciated for the ideas we bring to the table. And so I don't feel like it's a preference, but it's not like he's lost out, I feel, when I speak to him.
Got it. It makes a lot of sense. Balance. You're balancing out pretty nicely. Now, when you say, so the another aspect which is a big challenge for people, right, is, as they say, creating trailblazers. A viewpoint, a school of thought says that a leader's job, apart from having a vision and conviction around that vision, and then influencing a group of followers or employees or team members to make that vision a reality, the next job of a CXO or a leader, especially in the corporate sector, is to create a set of trailblazers or next generation leaders, right? So if I'm a CXO and I'm looking at creating the next generation of leaders, right, what should I focus on? Finding people, mentoring them inside the company, getting the right people from outside, or having a balance between the two, looking at people like the millennials, or going back to the experience, or creating a mixture. Now, what should I focus on if I have to create next generation of leaders inside my company? So what would be your advice on that?
I don't have like a pithy. I don't think it's like a short answer. It's all those things. If you only grow from within, then you lose the perspectives that other people who worked at other companies can bring. If you only bring from outside, then people below feel like they're not being rewarded for loyalty. If you bring in millennials, you get new ideas, but perhaps you get some dissatisfaction and a short-term focus. If you get old people, you get stability, but you don't get the new ideas. So I think it's mixing, and it's finding that balance. It's like I don't think there's a recipe that you can cut and paste, because each place is so contextual. Each industry or company, or kind of like the history they've been, is so contextual. So I think it's about paying attention. It's paying attention to what's working, what's not working, and then making those adjustments. And like when my mom used to cook, it wasn't like she had a recipe and she was exactly 2 tablespoons exactly that. She would taste it, change it, taste it, and she would know, this is too hot, too slow. Here, have a spoon. Is this okay? Need more sugar? She would change that. So I think all our all our mothers, we don't follow a formula like step by step. Like a KFC chicken is like, there's a formula. There's like, we kind of like experiment a little bit and keep evolving as a thing. So if I was to say, I'm not going to give a formula, but pay attention to what's working, what's not working.
Mhm.
Keep listening. Keep kind of like seeing just basically just pay attention to what's working, what's not working. Do more of what's working. Find solutions to what's not working, and your recipe will evolve and emerge through the process of that iterative process, rather than here's the formula, apply it, and that should work.
Mhm. Mhm. Explore it. I mean, sorry, exploration is the way you are saying, right? Basically.
Yeah, iteratively. It's iteratively seeing
Yeah.
what's working, not working. Keep tasting it and making adjustments. A little bit more salt. No, that needs a little bit more this. A little bit more pepper. Keep tasting it and keep tweaking it as you're moving forward.
Okay. Do you think people are resistant to change? People resist change, right? Do you think that's a fact when it comes to the corporate sector, or like leadership? When I basically talk of leadership, I go into four different dimensions. One is political leadership, that every country has a political leadership. Then there is military leadership, and there's corporate leadership. Then there is social leadership, like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. So do you think there's an overlap of leadership, or it's contextual leadership in each of the different domains? And
I mean, it will change in certain places. I mean, in military leadership, you don't have as much questioning. It's not encouraged, and it's probably ineffective. So, in a battlefield, when the general says we're not going to go up that mountain slope from here, you don't want somebody saying, "But I don't agree with that. Why don't we doing this?" You don't have the time to have, like, 30-minute conversation in the middle of the battle. And so, when somebody signs up, it's you do as you're told. You don't question your orders, you don't question your superiors. Our job is not to question the who, what, or why. Ours is to just do and die. That is a structure that is effective and appropriate in a military life or death sort of situation. You don't have the time to have a debate. In Google, for example, if the boss just says, do it because I said it and I don't want you to question it, well, the very creativity and innovation that you need, and people are not going to feel engaged. They're not going to feel like their voice has a say. So you're going to get everybody quitting, or you're going to get the most, non creative people on the planet. So what will work in one place would be completely suicidal in the other place, and vice versa, right? So yes, to a certain level, it is contextual, and there'll be, I'm sure, there's certain traits that will transfer. You do want to listen to your team at certain times. After the battle, you want to hear their point of view. They want to feel like their voice has something, but to different amounts in different situations. Similarly, in a concrete plant run by an established family business for 50 years, where like people are from small towns, it's a much more hierarchical, it's a different culture to a startup where everybody's 25 to 33, etc. Everybody's like highly intelligent. There isn't that sort of hierarchy, etc. So different things, I think, work in different places.
Awesome. So, but when we were discussing the previous question and the question about culture creation, right? There is no fixed recipe for everything. You cannot just have it the same way in every company, right? But there is, as Tony Robbins says, success leaves clues. You can model success and then tweak it to your needs and your culture, right? So if we have to look at the most successful companies and their cultures, what would be those two or three things that we can learn from them and then contextualize or customize to our needs? What would be your thoughts on the top two or three things around creating a culture, or creating a culture, or the second question I was asking is about creating a trailblazers, basically next generation leaders. So what would be your top two or three patterns?
Yeah, let me just answer the previous question, which I didn't really get around to first, and then I'll come to this one. The question you asked me is there resistance to change,
Right.
in organizations? And I didn't quite complete that, I feel. I forgot, actually, the question. And I think it's not a fact. So you said, is that a fact? It's not a fact, it's a lens. Because I can say people are resistant to change, or I can say people, are open to change, and neither one is true, because I can find evidence that will give examples where people have changed and they've moved towards change, and they've deliberately put themselves in situations which force themselves to grow, etc. And I can give you examples of places where people have struggled, etc. So I think, do I look at this ball from this angle, or I do it from this angle? Neither one is right, but both views, if I combine them, it'll give me a 360 view of this object that I'm looking at. So people are resistant to change as one lens, and it's equal to say there's another way of looking. People are open to change, and there's a wisdom to both, right? And I think how I look at it is, there are certain things that people, we have conflicting desires, right? So we want to learn and grow, but we don't want to fail, right? We want to challenge ourselves, but we don't want to fail. We want to please people, but we don't want to lose our own, point of view, right? We want to trust ourselves, but we don't want to be rigid, right? We want to try new things because that's interesting, but we're afraid we might be incompetent in these new areas because we haven't done them before. So we're both pulled. So I think the trick is to make a culture where you understand that these are natural things that we are scared of, natural things we want to move at. So in a workshop, for example, let me give you an example. A coaching workshop, people come to the workshop to learn. So if they're not participating, so I said, who has questions? And nobody puts up their hands. Does that mean that they don't want to learn, that they are close to learning, that they're not interested, right? Does that mean that? Because, based on the results, I asked, who has a question? Nobody put up their hand. And I would say, no, of course they want to learn. They're scared because what if they ask a question that's stupid, right? What if they get feedback on some of their behaviors that is uncomfortable for them, right? What if the trainer said, hey, you're asking this question, this reflects something about your beliefs, for example. So then if I say people want to grow and learn, but they are scared of being judged, they're scared of being criticized. So how can I create a space which feels safe, which allows them which makes it more likely that they will ask the question that will lead to learning. So they want to learn, but they're scared of being judged, I think is fair. Similarly, people want to grow, people want to learn, people want to adapt. They're afraid they will fail. They will afraid they will make mistakes. They will afraid they will be out of their areas of competence. So understanding both the fear and the desire, that can help me kind of like craft a communication or culture or situation that addresses their concerns and has them kind of really experience that what is possible, the desire side, and allays their concern. So I've got to see it as a little bit of both, rather than they're closed, they're fixed, they're rigid, because then I become judgmental, or they're open, they're this, because then I might become over optimistic and over idealistic, and then I get disappointed or it doesn't work. I've got to say, we are complex human beings and we both have desires and we have concerns. Let's look at both of these.
Right. Makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
And then the second question you just asked me just now, I'm sorry, I lost it while I answered the previous one, was
The
about
modeling success. What are the things that we can learn from the top successful companies and replicate and then start contextualizing in the context of our organization? What would be those top
I
two
think
companies?
large successful organizations have scaled engagement, right? They have scaled engagement that people throughout, let's say McKinsey, even as a management trainee, they are motivated. As a partner, they are motivated. At Goldman Sachs, the top guy is motivated, the guy who's just joined and motivated, right? And so I think engagement is the biggest thing that if you have people disengaging at every level, it's not going to be a survival. It's not going to survive, right? And I think there's obviously the Gallup 10 questions. That's a great framework for saying, okay, as a diagnostic of why people are engaged or not engaged. They have like 10 questions. You're like, are you clear on what is expected of you?
Right.
Does your work meaningful? Has somebody given you appreciation? Do you have a best friend at work? They have a bunch of questions. And I think if people answer yes to all those questions, they're more likely to be engaged. If they say, no, I don't have a best friend at work, they might know what is expected of work. They might have received appreciation work. But if they feel like I'm lonely and I'm not having fun, well, there's going to be a certain impact on engagement. So I think if somebody is looking for a template or the questions to ask your team to kind of like diagnose which parts of the culture are working or not working to get the maximum engagement from them, that's a great tool. Yeah, and I think my own interesting insight, which I found was they said that it's not happy employees that make the best organizations. It's engagement, and the difference being that somebody could work like 2 hours a day, take like a 4 hour lunch break, be paid like $1 million. That doesn't mean the company is going to perform well. They might be happy, but the performance of the company is like, well, we're paying a lot for not much in return. The companies that do well are people where people are engaged. They are like wanting to do something. They're driven in some way, and they could be really upset, saying, this is not happening, that's not happening. They haven't done this, and so I need to speak to this person. Even when they're upset and they think I can do something about it, I'm going to do something about it, that is engagement, right? But if something is like, yeah, the food is good, this is good, that is good, they're happy, but maybe they're not doing anything about it. So that's what I found interesting. Engagement is not the same thing necessarily as happiness. And in the 80s, people were doing employment satisfaction surveys. Now I think they move more to employee
Engagement,
engagement
sir.
surveys. And these questions, these 10 questions. So if anybody is looking for, okay, what is a template? I would say do a Google search for Gallup Q10 or Gallup 10 questions, etc. You will get a list of those 10 questions. Ask your team those questions, see which scores have a high rating, which ones have a low rating, and say, what are we going to do to improve the scores on these low rating things? For example, if it's I don't have a best friend at work, okay, the answer is let's go for a party. If it's like I have a best friend at work, but I don't know what I'm expected at work, or I don't have the tools, okay, what tools do you need, right? Okay, which part of your job are you not sure why you're doing? Let's have that conversation. So that's a great tool I found for, yeah, as a starting point.
Awesome. Now, we have been discussing various leadership traits because that's kind of something that I have been trying to understand through this question answer and discussions, right? We talked about emotional intelligence, we talked about authenticity. Now, anticipation. Do you think that's a skill a leader that gives an edge to someone as a leader? Okay, boss, this is a better leader because he's good in anticipation. Because there have been contexts and schools of thought, anticipation as a skill you should have as a leader. It makes you much more powerful and impactful, and et cetera, et cetera. So what's your take on that? The next skill in sequence to anticipation is continuous learning. That is something that they say leaders are readers also. That's also a line people use, right? So continuous learning and anticipation as two skills or two personality traits, however you want to look at it. What's their role in making you a better leader or a more impactful, effective leader?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to anticipate certain things, right? So, for example, demonetization was something that all leaders in India had to respond to almost instantaneously, right? And it was very difficult to anticipate that level of, cash changes, etc., in the economy. Similarly, the pandemic is something that has required all leaders to respond. Very difficult to anticipate that. Even something like AI, which has just emerged, I would say, in a big way in the last few months. Even a year ago, I don't think even people like titans of the technology world would have, Google, for example, you have the smartest visionary people.
Right.
Is some technology going to come that could potentially, like Bing Chat GPT, reduce our stock value by 20%? Is that possible? They would have been hard, even though they know artificial intelligence is going. So I think it's post the fact, it's easy to say, oh, that person was right. They have a great anticipation. But it's very hard to, I think, develop the ability to anticipate everything. There's certain trends, right? So we can kind of like extrapolate and say, okay, this is becoming bigger, like women in the workforce. It was like 5%, now it's 10%. It's likely to go to 15, 20, 25%. What are the changes in the culture? Maybe we need to do, some sensitivity training about how do you speak, how do you not speak before the harassment cases start. Maybe there's certain trends, that are going to be there. Like there are going to be more women toilets required in factories. So certain things you can extrapolate and predict. Certain things are very hard, I think, to anticipate. The Russia war, etc., and or the China breakdown because of the pandemic, the supply chain, etc. So I think you got to respond fast. The faster you respond, that experience will help you anticipate. And to the extent that you can, forward plan, you want to take some time strategically. As a leader, especially, you got to step out and say, okay, let's look at all the different things. Let's brainstorm about what might happen and get as many people talking about it, because they might say something that I can't foresee. There's no way I can anticipate everything. But taking out time for daily operations to brainstorm about what might happen, to extrapolate and kind of like, just talk about it and think of scenarios will help us. But you can't anticipate everything. And so, and in fact, the biggest things the things that I just mentioned, very hard to anticipate, I think. And so we've just got to be responsive. So there's a time when you have to step back and keep doing that on a regular basis. And then there's also time to very quickly respond and ramp up and trust yourself in that situation.
Continuous leadership as a skill. What's your take? What's your take on that?
I think
continuous learning or continuous curiosity, how do you want to put it? Because I believe it's curiosity. That learning could be anything. You can learn from somebody's experience, from your own experience. You can keep learning, but you have to have that curious mind. So continuous curiosity or continuous learning, they could be the same thing. But what's your take? What makes a leader better? What role does it play in making a leader?
Yeah, I think if you're hungry, and I'm not saying that's a good thing. Like there are people who scale because they want to keep taking their organization to the next level, to the next level, to the next level, right? And that lack of satisfaction leads to a desire for more, which will have them be hungry, which will lead to curiosity, which will lead to a willingness to change. And there are some places where I prefer stability. I prefer, like I don't want to keep kind of jumping, keep pushing myself. And so I've got to recognize if I'm feeling like comfortable, and then maybe it's time for me to. It's also knowing when to quit. It's like if I'm hungry, they'll keep learning. If I notice that I'm stagnating or I don't want to make the changes, etc., maybe it's time for me to do something else. And I think Bill Gates, for example, there was a time where he said, I don't want to like run Microsoft anymore. Let me hand it to somebody else, right? Whether it's Steve Ballmer or Satya Nadella. I don't want to kind of keep pushing myself to change and keep developing, etc. I'm bored. Let me do something else, right? And so he said, and he's still doing something that excites him, which is the foundation and the response to the pandemic. He's still busy, I'm sure, but he's like, I'm no longer as hungry. I don't want to work those hours. I don't want to manage that thing.
But that's
So let me.
precisely what continuous learning is, right? Because he's not trying to retain himself in one space. He's just trying to explore
Right.
and learn more and more. Curiosity is there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, but in a in terms of leadership, you also got to if you are hungry, you keep doing it. If you're like stagnant, be willing to acknowledge that, because it's very hard to leave. Being the CEO of Microsoft, you got like a $800 billion company. You're the richest person on the planet. You're running one of the most things. To say, okay, let me leave that because I want to do something new. I think that is a difficult decision, I think, right? I think it would be hard for me to have made that decision. But again, Jeff Bezos, he's kind of left the Amazon daily running to kind of, do Wall Street Journal or maybe political career one day, etc. So I think if you notice yourself not willing to do the things that are required to move to the next level, maybe it's time for you to do something new, or say this is the level I want, and that's okay. I personally don't have any desire to make Stillwater a 100 partner firm, etc. The three of us, and I'm very happy with that. I recognize that I'll find other hobbies, like whether it's learning the piano or whatever it is, something to keep me occupied. So I think it's being honest with yourself of this is the level, I'm comfortable with it. This is the level, I'm kind of stagnant, let me move to something else, or I'm hungry, I'm going to keep going. And I think one of those three decisions, you got to be honest with yourself and then make that choice.
Makes sense. So would you say self-awareness, the way you're putting it, I'm putting the word kind of there, self-awareness is key to becoming a leader, proper leader?
Yeah, it's paying attention to if you're bored or excited, if you're feeling stagnant or stressed. And if you're feeling bored or stressed, something needs to change about the level of challenge that I'm taking. If I'm stressed, maybe I'm taking too much challenge, which I'm not enjoying. Let me chill, or I need to develop my capability. Let me go for that. If I'm feeling bored, maybe I need to do something, new, or maybe I need to take bigger challenges. And if I'm happy, I just keep doing what I'm doing. But paying attention to my emotions on a day-to-day basis and then taking action. But it starts by listening to myself, really.
Awesome. Couple of last questions, quick questions. What's the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Best leadership advice I have ever received. I think, I don't know what it was, but Sanjay Behl, I think I don't know what he is just now, but he was at HUL. He then became CEO of Nokia. I'm not sure where he is just now, but when I was a management trainee, I went to him and I said, I'm afraid that I'm not going to be a good sales manager because I don't feel I'm as aggressive as I need to be. I see other people holding their team accountable, saying this is not acceptable, etc. I don't feel like I'd be comfortable being that harsh, and therefore I'm not sure if I'm a good fit for this, whether I'll be successful, right? And he said, Kanish, your politeness is an asset because anger is a blunt tool. Beyond a certain point, people will either get demotivated or they will react. They will get angry at you, right? So you can push it to a certain level, but you can't push it beyond that. But when you're polite, you can be sensitive to what other people are saying, and say what exactly you need to say, and in a way that's rigorous and which people will not argue with, because you're like saying, this is what I feel. This is what I would like to see from you. This is why I felt disappointed. And you'll do it in a way that people might feel, stung into action. They might feel sad, but they're not going to kind of get angry at you. So your politeness is an asset. Don't give that up. learn how to communicate. And I think that had me say, okay, how do people give feedback? What words do they use? When they're setting expectations, when they're holding people accountable, when they're saying no to people, how can you do that in a way that doesn't compromise the relationship? Let me study that subject. And I think that helped me learn how to be effective while still maintaining a good relation with people, not compromising the performance. So that one line feedback, your politeness is an asset, and you don't need to compromise that in order to be a good sales manager or any other sort of leader. I think that for me is the biggest one.
That is a big one, because leadership is about knowing your team members in terms of their strengths and encouraging them to play along with their strengths rather than just focusing on you are weak here, you're weak there, and so that's pretty solid advice. So, any bad leadership advice you have ever received?
It was again, I wouldn't say it's bad. It's just one that I didn't apply. It was that you shouldn't be too friendly with your subordinates, because if you're too friendly and too casual with them, they will take you for granted. They will tell you, oh, the boss, the number wasn't possible. They will treat you as a friend. They will not take it seriously when you try to hold them accountable. And so there's got to be a distance between you and your team members. They can't be your friends, you know? And I think there's some value in that. But I think my own style is no, where you can swear at me, you can do whatever. I'm going to take the final decision. I'll be honest with you. You be honest with me. I'm not above you. The organization has given me the authority to make the final decision. I'm going to take that, but I want you to speak honestly. I want you to argue with me. I want to sit down and we'll sing songs together and we'll talk about our lives together. We will be friends. And I'm your boss in that I take the final decision, but there won't be a hierarchy between you can't say this to me because I'm your boss. You can't speak to me even though you can speak that way to your friends. So that is something that I didn't find fit my style. And I'm not saying it's the wrong or bad advice. So for other people, it may work very effectively, but it didn't fit for the way
It
that
didn't resonate with your approach of leadership.
yeah, it is just I found my style more comfortable for me, and it was working. So I never felt the need to kind of establish that distance.
What is your favorite book in the context of leadership?
A favorite book in context of leadership.
And then favorite book in any context. Leadership one, your top favorite book one. So let's do two.
Oh, well, let me, The Book of the Die, right, by a gentleman called Luke Reinhardt. And the Book of the Die is it's a philosophy book on Taoism, Buddhism, even Hinduism, let's say. And it takes all these philosophical concepts and presents them in a funny cartoons or stories or parables, etc., poems, limericks, very irreverent sort of way. And I think the basic message is we take life too seriously. We take life too seriously. We take our image too seriously. We take results too seriously. We take feedback too seriously. Allowing ourselves to play, with the situation will have us just enjoy ourselves much more. And I think for even as a leadership we call our book The Game of Life. We play. The best sign of living a life well is, are you having fun? And I even poster on my wall says, fun. We were even thinking of, we bought the domain stillwater.fun. Just now we have stillwater.co.in, but we bought it, and one day I might just move to that. So I think that book has really said that all the serious leadership strengths, like sincerity, discipline, hard work, commitment, ownership, responsibility, these are all sacrifices. They're all tough terms, right? But fun, humor, playfulness, we don't see them as leadership competencies, right? However, when you have fun at work, it creates greater bonding, more laughter, more creativity, lower attrition, fluider conversations, more honest conversations with a greater level of safety. So there's a huge amount of value that you can create in terms of energy and stuff from fun and playfulness. And I think we go too far into, oh, we didn't achieve the quarter's target. This is a disaster. This is a crisis. This is a critical situation. Rather than, wow, what an interesting problem to solve. Let's sit down and brainstorm, etc. So I think bringing the fun element into our lives is something that book really, from a life point of view, from a business point of view, I think it's a great counterpoint to everything that you normally hear about.
Okay. Anything on specific leadership?
I would say the same thing. Like instill your leadership style with a sense of fun, and you will get better results, and you enjoy life more. And ultimately, you are the ultimate consumer of your life. So if you're not enjoying it, what was the point in the first place?
Right, makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we did this. Okay, book we covered. What's your last message before we close this session? What would be your last message to people, aspiring leaders, basically, that can help them become more effective or impactful or have more fun as a leader? What's your advice?
I would say, again, it's not advice as such, but it's something that I have found valuable is reflecting, writing. I journal every day. It's a difficult habit to imbibe. Lots of leaders don't do it, and they're very successful and very happy. Personally, I have found journaling very helpful because I think introspection leads to clarity. Clarity leads to conviction. Conviction leads to commitment, the willingness to do what's required. Commitment leads to a track record of results. Track record of results gives me the confidence that I can handle and anticipate whatever happens in the future. And when I feel confident that I can handle the uncertainty of the future, it allows me to relax, live in the present, and enjoy myself. And so, really, the introspection that I get from journaling eventually, I think, culminates in just being able to appreciate life and enjoy it because of those connections. So, writing about a subject, if you're not going to journal about yourself, writing about a subject. If you're a sales manager, write a blog on things you've learned at sales. It forces me to think. It becomes sharper in my thinking, and that slowly translates into clarity of decision making, credibility in the eyes of others. Again, the ability to influence, create legacy and stuff. So I would say write more. That's something that I have found useful. But I know lots of people who don't write, and they're very, very successful. So that's just what I have found useful in my life.
Awesome. So thank you, Kanishka. You have shared a lot, and you have given me also a few pointers in terms of how to look at the other side of the coin, right? So thanks for adding value to me and sharing your wisdom and insights with us today. And it is great discussion, and I hope the audience learns from it and takes away things that they can implement in their lives and make workplaces better, make themselves a better leaders, right? So thank you for that.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Deepak. It was a lot of fun having this conversation. Have a great day, buddy.
Thanks. Bye.
Sure, bye.
Hello guys and welcome back. I hope you have learned a lot from this discussion, and I hope you have taken tons of notes, and I hope that you are ready to go back and start implementing your lessons that you have learned from this discussion in your life to make yourself a better leader and to create workplaces of the future. I'll see you next Sunday 8 a.m. again with a new episode of In Search of Success. Maybe slowly we'll start moving into other aspects of the podcast. We have been discussing leadership for some time, so we'll slowly move into life and success. We'll approach a few new guests, and we'll start learning in other aspects also, right? So I'll see you next Sunday 8 a.m. With the next episode. Till then, take care and be limitless.